And joining me now is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Senator Graham, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on such a historic day.
Thank you for being here on an historic morning, Senator. Let me start with the big question. Is the United States at war with Iran?
I think the Ayatollah would say, yeah. I don't know if this is technically a war, but here's what I can say the headline is for me Sunday. The mothership of terrorism is sinking. The captain is dead. The largest state sponsor of terrorism, Iran, is close to collapsing. The leader of the largest state sponsor of terrorism and his inner team are dead. The mothership that fuels the proxies is in sinking mode. The goal of this operation is to change the threat, not the regime. When this operation is over, no matter who takes over in Iran, they will not have ballistic missiles to hurt us, Israel, or the region. They will not have the capability to be the largest state sponsor of terrorism, whether it's a cleric or a group of representative of the country where there's an election. It doesn't matter right now. Iran in the future will no longer be the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They cannot rain terror on the region. They cannot commit mass murder. That's the goal of this operation. Again, the mothership of terrorism is sinking. The captain is dead. Well done, President Trump. It's been the policy of this country for decades to eliminate this regime. President Trump did it. Admiral Cooper came up with a military plan that's unbelievable. We're not done yet, but when it is done, Iran will no longer be capable of being the largest state sponsor of terrorism. That is the goal, and that goal will be achieved.
Senator, let me ask you, because as you are saying, the leader, the Ayatollah supreme leader, is dead. Will the United States pick the next leader of Iran, or will the Iranian people pick the next leader?
I talked to the Crown Prince. He's got some ideas about transition. There will be no American boots on the ground. This is not Iraq. This is not Germany. This is not Japan. We're going to free the people up from a terrorist regime. And the goal is not only to help the Iranian people to chart a new destiny, to make sure no matter who takes over in Iran, no matter who it is, no matter who the people pick, they cannot become the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They can't fuel Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas. They can't have ballistic missiles. They can't have a nuclear weapon. They will be out of the terrorism business. So the people will pick. As to the people, choose wisely. We want to be your friend. We'd like to have a good relationship with you going forward, but that is up to you. Now, what am I going to do next? When this regime can no longer threaten the region, I'm going to build on what I did with President Biden to try to get Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalize. If the fall of this regime would lead to normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, the center of gravity for Islam is Saudi Arabia, the one and only Jewish state. If they could make peace and have a normal relationship because this regime fell, it would be historic. Taking the regime down is a big deal. Normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel is a historic deal. That's where I'm going to spend my time and energy. To President Trump, you did something everybody talked about. You took Maduro down. Everybody talked about it. You did it. You took the Ayatollah down. Again, the goal of this operation is to make sure there will never be in Iran a state sponsor of terrorism to rain havoc on us and the region. That's the goal. I hope the people will choose wisely.
Senator, history tells us just how complicated regime change is. We saw that when Saddam Hussein was ousted and a terror threat and group moved in. How will the United States make sure that the next Iranian government isn't worse than the current regime?
It's not our job to pick the next Iranian government. I don't remember being attacked by Iraq anytime, in the past. Iraq is complicated, but, we have a relationship with Iraq. It's up to Iran to pick your leader. It's not my job. It's not President Trump's job. We're not going to occupy the country. We're going to give the people of Iran a chance to do something they've never had before, chart their own destiny. We're going to take away from any future regime the ability, any future government, the ability to have a ballistic missile program, a nuclear program, or support terrorism. That's what we're going to do. And if out of this comes a new government that we can do business with, great. But having Iran no longer the state sponsor of terrorism opens up historic opportunities. It's the one irritant in the region. It's the one impediment to real peace. We'll never get to where we want to go as long as Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And I'm here to tell you, the largest state sponsor of terrorism, the mothership of terrorism, is sinking, and the captain is dead, and a lot of good things are going to follow.
Senator, let's talk about the strategy moving forward. In a social media post Sunday, President Trump wrote this, quote, "Hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves." Is hope the plan for the future of Iran?
No, the future of Iran is going to be determined by the Iranian people. The new Iran, whatever it is, whether it's a cleric or a representative democracy, our goal is to make sure it cannot become, again, the largest state sponsor of terrorism. That's a win for us.
But is there a plan to make sure that happens, Senator? Is there a plan? Does the president have a plan to guarantee that that happens?
No, it's not his job or my job to do this. How many times do I have to tell you? Our job is to make sure Iran is no longer the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to help the people reconstruct a new government, no boots on the ground. We don't own, you know, this idea you break it, you own it. I don't buy that one bit. It's in America's interest to make sure the Ayatollah is dead. He's dead. It's in America's interest to make sure that Iran can no longer be the largest state sponsor of terrorism. We're close. Once the people decide what they want to do next, I don't mind helping them. But I know what they're not going to be allowed to do next: regenerate the largest state sponsor of terrorism. I'm going to focus on having Iran off the map as the largest state sponsor of terrorism and see if we can build a new Mideast.
All right, we got a lot more to get to. President Trump said the objective is, quote, to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. What specifically were the imminent threats that justified this operation, Senator?
They were building ballistic missiles that could eventually reach the United States. They have been trying for decades to build a nuclear weapon. Midnight Hammer worked, but they were right back at it. The Ayatollah is a religious Nazi. His regime was founded around three principles: to purify Islam, to dominate Islam, to take over Islam, to do away with Saudi Arabia as the center of gravity for Islam and let it be Iran, to kill the Jews, to annihilate the Jewish state and come after us, drive us out of the region. That's what he said. He can't do that anymore because he's dead. And anybody who wants to do that in the future, you're going to be dead too. So the point is, the Iranian threat to the United States through ballistic missiles, through a nuclear program, the proxies have killed a lot of Americans. Hezbollah has American blood on its hands, so does Hamas. None of that's going to be able to happen again. They were threats to us. President Donald J. Trump, you eliminated one of the largest threats to the United States by taking this regime down. We're not there yet, but we're close. And when this regime goes down, I'm going to work my ass off with Democrats to build on what Biden tried to do, get Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel, which would be the biggest change in 1,000 years. And we can't do it until the terrorist regime in Iran is replaced, and we're very, very close.
Senator, let me ask you, because the president's opposition to regime change and war, quite frankly, was central to what he described as his America First agenda. On Saturday, former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote this, quote, "We said no more foreign wars, no more regime change. We said it on rally stage after rally stage, speech after speech. Trump, Vance, basically the entire administration campaigned on it and promised to put America first and make America great again." Did the president's strikes on Iran go against everything that he promised the American people, Senator?
Quite the opposite. He promised to keep us safe, to stand up to people who would hurt America. She's a former congressman for a reason. What is it? America First is the following: make sure that no regime who wishes to hurt America can. to make sure that they don't have a ballistic missile capability to attack our country. They have American blood on their hands. We destroyed their missile program, the nuclear program. They were coming right back at it. America first is not isolationism. America first is not head in the sand. America first is not to get entangled. We're not going to have any boots on the ground in Iran. But America first is to kill people who wish us ill, with a record of trying to destroy us in the region, to take them off the table. Celebrate today, please, my Democratic colleagues, that the most evil man on the planet is no more. He terrorized his own people. 32,000 people at least have been killed protesting a better life. He was trying to get a nuclear weapon. He was building missiles to hit the United States. He was a religious Nazi that had a horrible agenda for the region and the world. He is no more. Well done, President Trump. Well done to your team. This is something to celebrate.
Senator, let me follow up with you on this point, because on Friday, Vice President Vance says there's, quote, no chance of a long conflict in Iran. But President Trump said a drawn-out war is, quote, always a risk. So which is it? Could Iran, in fact, become another forever war, Senator?
Give me a break. We're going to beat Iran. The Arabs are now joined with us. When the Iranians attacked their Arab neighbors, they made a fatal mistake. We're going to have Arab countries use military force to take this regime down. The Arab world is living for the day that Iran is no more. The Iranian regime has terrorized the region. They've killed Americans. They've terrorized the entire region. You're going to see Arabs join the fight. So this is a historic moment where the Arab world and the United States have joined together to take down the largest state sponsor of terrorism, a truly evil man, a religious Nazi who no longer can rain terror on his people or the world. You know, when Obama took bin Laden out, I clapped like a seal. I gave him credit. It was a great thing to do. It was the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. We negotiated with these people over and over again. They were not interested in giving up their nuclear program because they're religious Nazis. They have a religious agenda. I don't think everybody in Iran's a religious Nazi.
Senator, let me get this final question in, because it's an important one. As a member of the House, you voted to give former President George W. Bush approval to go to war with Iraq back in 2002. Does Congress now need to vote to approve this war with Iran?
No, I have no desire. I think the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. What are we doing here?
But what's the difference? You voted to give George Bush authorization to go to war with Iraq.
Because he came and asked. He came and asked.
So does President Trump need to ask?
They wanted the authority. No, that's what I'm trying to tell you. This is a military operation designed to eliminate threats that have existed against our country. What are the threats? Ballistic missile programs that were getting bigger, not smaller, an effort to reestablish a nuclear program that could threaten us in the region, an effort to keep the proxy network alive that has American blood on its hands. He was justified doing this. Every president before him talked about doing it. Okay. He actually did it. He has the legal authority to do it, and these operations will continue until the threat is no longer there. The new Iran will not be allowed to threaten America. It will not be allowed to be the largest state sponsor of terrorism ever again, and that opens up historic opportunities.
All right, Senator Lindsey Graham, thank you for starting us off this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.